So I'll be the moderator for this session. For the first session, we're going to look at the issues with farmers, written by Dr. Lin. And we have reviewers, Alizan. And who is the internal reviewer? Dr. Teo.
Oh, Dr. Teo.
Yes. I'll be the moderator. So for your information, the presenter will have 20 minutes to present the paper, and then Dr. Lin will give her intervention for 10 minutes, and then we'll open for discussion. Afika over here will be the timekeeper. All right. Without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Dr. Lin.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Su. Good morning, Alizan and friends and colleagues. This situational analysis focuses on farmers in 12 predominantly agricultural constituencies. And the crucial issue among all of them is poverty and the poor socioeconomic conditions, and many are in debt and are unable to pay rent to landowners. Among the causes of declining income is the drastic increase in the cost of production, which include wages, machinery rental, land rental, fertilizers, pesticides, livestock feeds, materials for irrigation and other input costs, which have increased by 80 to 100%. And their lack of affordability will in turn impact on the yield, output, and income, creating a vicious cycle for the farmers. And farmers in all the constituencies reported a lack of cooperation from government agencies and say that officials are often absent from community dialogues. They say that DOA, Department of Agriculture, does not monitor the conditions of farmers' crops. The distribution of subsidized fertilizers and pesticides is irregular and do not meet their needs. And farmers face attacks from crop diseases as well as from wild animals, but reported that there is no monitoring from DOA or Department of Veterinary Services, and this issue cannot be resolved. And paddy field leveling work is not done according to the planting schedule, thus disrupting the planting circle of the rice farmers. And some farmers find it challenging to produce high quality crops due to limited technical knowledge, and DOA needs to provide sufficient training and extension services for them to improve their skill sets and master technological applications that will boost their crop productivity. And for JPS, the cleaning of drains have been reduced from 4 times a year to twice a year, leading to growth of weeds, which affect the growth of paddy plants. And JPS also needs to synchronize their work with the farmers' planting schedule. Farm roads are not maintained, and some constituencies do not have proper access roads, which cut them off from markets. It is important that the government provides sufficient funding for these works, or the production of paddy and other crops will be adversely affected, especially in the face of climate and weather change. Farmers complain that the prices set by Pharma is too low. They say that Pharma is more interested in working with the Ministry of Consumer Affairs to keep prices low for consumers. And Pharma does not monitor the demand and supply situation in order to advise farmers accordingly, leading to overproduction and dumping of produce. Pharma has to increase and improve the marketing of agro-food products to provide reasonable returns to the farmers. And farmers reported there is a lack of information from the farmers' organizations about facilities, assistance, lower price inputs and grants that are available for members. And in certain remote constituencies like Kalabakan, government agencies are situated and available only in adjacent constituency. And in Tenom, farmers claim that it's difficult to even meet with district officers and that they do not provide good treatment to them. There is therefore a need to address poor service delivery. It is the responsibility of government agencies, but they do not seem to have been effectively addressed to meet the needs of the local communities. There is widespread dissatisfaction on the performance of DOA, Pharma, JPS, Bernas, farmers' organizations, NAFAS. As such, it is important and urgent to review public development policies and service delivery modes, as well as to undertake institutional reform to improve the performance of frontline agencies. Federal agencies need to be more proactive and oversee the state and local agencies to improve services for the local communities. Thirdly, there is a lack of emphasis on research, development, and extension. The spending on agricultural R&D as a share of agricultural GDP declined from 1.9% in 2020 and in 2002 to only 0.8% in 2016. This implementation of effective research, development, and extension to improve yield and reduce production costs is crucial to raise farmers' income and self-sufficiency levels. This entails energizing the research, development, and extension subsystem to increase yield, cropping intensity, and extension effectiveness. Provision of productive incentives for efficient use of inputs and local input production. The fourth issue is on land tenure. Farmers in Kalabakan, Polakrai, Tenom, Serian, and Kuantan face insecurity of tenure. The limited supply of land allocated for agriculture has severely hindered agricultural advancement. About 6 billion hectares are now under oil palm, another 1 million under rubber, and only about 1 million for all other agro-food productions. And the average size of agricultural land holdings have declined from about 2.3 hectares in 1970 to about 1 hectare in 2025. And this makes the economic situation of the small farmers even more fragile. And many smallholder farmers face constraint on land issues. Some are only able to obtain TOL, temporary occupational license, that has to be renewed annually. Agricultural land reform is needed and should be done in a more transparent, accessible, flexible manner with longer occupancy leases for farmers. This can help farmers have security of land tenure that will allow them to invest into modern technologies to increase yield and production. The fifth issue is on poor quality seeds. Most farmers say that they have been receiving poor quality seeds from the area farmers organization. And padi angin or wind rice is a weed that can be detected only about 2 months after planting, as the stalks look similar to rice stalks. It causes losses to farmers and needs to be controlled at all levels. The most popular control method today is a chemical spray method, and DOA has to step up to provide hands-on training on the characterization of wind paddy, infestation levels, and control methods. In December 2020, MOA, Ministry of Agriculture, appointed NAFAS as the sole seed distributor and monopoly to sell seeds at the price of 35 ringgit for a 20 kilo bag, which is 2 ringgit higher than previously. And this has caused consternation among farmers. Farmers would prefer to let the market forces decide on the ceiling prices for paddy seeds. Besides the higher prices, problems also arise when seedlings fail to grow, and farmers will not know until 2 or 3 weeks later when they realize that the seeds have not sprouted. In the open market, shop owners are willing to replace them. Their concerns become even more evident when following the designation of NAFAS as the sole supplier, seeds have not even been supplied to the farmers in most of peninsular Malaysia when the irrigation schedule has started into phase 1 and phase 2, and they're still not receiving their seeds. And even more unfortunate, some farmers, those who have received the seeds, have received low quality seed and old seeds, and some seeds have already become powdery. And so the appointment of SNAFAS as a monopoly is really going off on a very rough start. And 6th issue on paddy subsidy and rice milling scheme. Farmers complain that the deduction on the paddy price up to 28% due to moisture content is too high. Previously, it was only up to 20%. Now it's up to 28%, and this further reduces their income. Despite more than 50 years of the National Agriculture Policy and paddy subsidy schemes, together with the billions of ringgit spent on infrastructure, irrigation, and other facilities, more than 90% of paddy farmers are in the B40 group. So the expenditure on rice subsidy and incentives has been on an increasing trend to about 2 billion ringgit annually. The paddy and rice sector is one of the most assisted and subsidized in the country. However, the large amounts of subsidy has not contributed to the improved performance of the sector. Some have argued that the subsidy mentality have created heavy reliance on the government. And I would suggest that the removal of subsidies could enhance the decision-making skills and entrepreneurship of the farmers. This can be done by starting with an output-based payment, as the payment package resembles the current subsidies, except that it is based solely on output. Once the farmers get familiarized with receiving a lump sum payment based on output, direct payment can be introduced to indicate that the payment is no longer attached to any subsidy. And the 7th issue concerns Padi Beras Nasional Bernas. Malaysia's paddy and rice industry has been under a protectionist regime for 5 decades. Bernas was appointed in 1994 to take over from LPN, and it is a state trading enterprise monopoly to import rice, impose price controls at farm and retail levels, and distribute input and output subsidies. This has led to a highly protected industry, distortive market, slow growth, and inefficient use of resources. And it has to be remembered, we have to be reminded that Bernas is a public listed company with the primary objective of profit maximization. And so this conflicts directly with its so-called social development obligations. The PH government had in its manifesto promised the removal of the rice import monopoly by Bernas by 2021, when its 10-year term was due to end in January 2021. However, by March 2020, the PH government was replaced by the PN government, which then proceeded to extend the concession to Bernas for another 10 years to 2030. However, on December last year, the new Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim of the Unity Government said that he has reprimanded Bernas owner, billionaire Syed Mokhtar Abu Kari, over the company's monopoly on rice imports and instructed Bernas to pay 60 million ringgit to poor rice farmers. So it works out to about 250 ringgit per farmer. Anwar vowed that the government would not allow wealth to be hogged by politicians and their associates to suck the blood of poor farmers. Anwar said the issue involving Bernas has been going on for decades, and that it was high time to nip the pressing matter in the bud. This is the first time I'm saying this. Enough is enough. That was from the new PM. With the paddy sector's stagnating productivity growth and the subsidy programs presenting an ever-increasing fiscal burden, there is need to review and recalibrate when so much taxpayer is being allocated as subsidy for rice by the Malaysian government with no improvements in sight and becoming ever-increasing hope and poverty for the farmers. And the neglect of other food crop sectors has led to the increasing food import bill, which have risen to 63 billion in 2022. There is a need to relook at the food self-sufficiency policy and structure of agricultural production that is unbalanced and costly. In conclusion, I would say that the causes for this unsustainable development include over-regulation of the paddy sector and reliance on government subsidies and monopolistic price control, poor service delivery, lack of research and development, poor marketing and connection to the supply chain, poor infrastructure, and lack of security of land tenure. All these need to be remedied in a concerted, holistic, and integrated manner and good governance. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lin. As you all can see, the paper is quite holistic. It addressed the issue from the grassroots to the government sectors, including the government agencies. I think Dr. Lin's report painted a really clear picture of how unsustainable at this moment for our food security for the country, precisely because of all these stakeholders. I will just pass to Alizan for your review. Thank you.
Thank you, Fen, and thank you, Dr. Lin, for a really comprehensive paper. It's so comprehensive, I told Dr. Lin that it's hard to add anything to the paper itself. But let me just focus on a few things, including some of the issues that were brought up, some of the methodological issues, and also the recommendations as well. But before that, I think one of the key things highlighted is actually to end. You highlighted the challenge in the balance between whether the findings are generalizable or whether they are essentially really focused or really issues that are very, very contextual. So I think first and foremost, the more we undertake these studies, as you highlighted yourself, the issues itself become generalizable because they keep on repeating.
Yeah.
And I will share that with some of the views from the findings from the previous years as well. But however, how they manifest themselves are different in every location. So one of the key things here, whether for this report or maybe in general as well, is when we talk about the recommendations, I think this is a general challenge that we face. Some of the recommendations that we bring up are general recommendations, but some are very specific as well to the location. I think for agriculture, they're quite general, yes. And we've managed to find that, but we just have to keep this in mind. And this does not mean that our findings are not merited, but what this means also is that institutionally, how we address some of these issues have to be also not through just one specific way of addressing them. And I think generally as well, we have to highlight some of these issues. I mean, in the context of this paper, for example, there are specific issues on NAFA's seedings. I mean, that's very specific, and
But it's for all paddy farmers.
But it's all for paddy farmers. So, but what I'm getting at also is maybe there is need for reviewing NAFAS itself, yeah. So a very specific recommendation, and I think maybe we can separate the two. Secondly, I think one of the key general benefits of doing of the paper and our methodology is the fact that we are looking at it in terms of SDGs. So what this paper should, strongly highlights is the socioeconomic plight and poverty of the farmers. Sometimes we work closely with Mafi, the focus tends to shift towards, this, Dr. Lin, production,
Yes.
production, yield, and so on. So I think there is a lot of benefit in looking at it from this target group approach and looking at it from an SDGs approach, which covers other SDGs. Because when you talk about agriculture, you might incline to be focused on SDG 2, which is end hunger, but obviously with this approach of APPGM SDG, this is not the case. So I think there's a lot of benefit of doing the approach that we have been doing. Okay, in terms of issues, Dr. Lin highlighted quite a few. This includes increases in input prices, paddy subsidy and rice milling, service delivery challenges, crop disease and pests, marketing, land tenure, infrastructure, environmental issues, and climate change, as well as aging farmers as well that you've put in your paper, but you haven't highlighted much in your intervention just now. Just to highlight there, again, with this comment of generalizable, these are many issues that were also found in the previous years. The previous years focus on a few, just for comparison, a few topics which were prioritized. This was low market access, again, which Dr. Lin touched. Idle land, which you touched on, land tenure. Generally unsustainable development. This is something less, I think, that came out less in terms of the land planning, but also is there. Income and increase in cost, especially of inputs, that featured strongly. Urban farming featured strongly in the previous years, but I think this was focused more on rural constituencies. So in urban areas, we found urban farming as one of the key issues, and land ownership. So it's comparable, and the recommendation I would highlight here, I don't know if it's feasible or not, maybe not within the situational analysis report, but maybe for you later on, Dr. Suan, is we need to have a year-by-year comparison or a synthesis over the years. Because again, I think there is a lot of benefit in highlighting the importance of it, or putting the case that it is generalizable. I think it's very important because it's easy to say that our findings are just based on certain constituencies, but the more we develop this methodology, we are saying, listen, it's not in one constituency, it's not in 5 constituencies. This is happening across the board. So I think that there is a need to compile a synthesis, I don't know, maybe a 5-year assessment next year. So please stay. Okay, in terms of methodology, I think it's very interesting to do the target group approach compared to a thematic approach. But funnily enough, at least for this one, I'm reviewing it, it doesn't make much difference because it's the agro-food sector. For others, I'm not sure if there will be major differences, though the major thing probably will be that some themes maybe will not be a focus. I don't know, but it depends. But again, Dr. Lin, you did a great job. You brought in the report holistically, including issues of social, economic, and environmental issues. So one comment there is not for this paper, I think for all the other reports, just to make sure that even though it's a target group-based approach, it has to cover the other dimensions as well, because if not, it might not be focused. One thing that perhaps can be enhanced slightly, I think, is the secondary data validation, because there is a lot of criticism, Dr. Lin. So this is often the defensive nature of government will always come back, and if that can be enhanced in some of the some of the points that were brought up, especially. Yes.
Yeah, and I did find a lot more data to enhance it, because a lot of it is from the reports also. I did a lot of other research. to
Yeah.
Enhance this. Yeah.
So I don't know
But
for the
that's important,
researchers,
yeah.
just to cover ourselves,
Yeah.
secondary data validation could be enhanced slightly. A third thing that I think can be inserted more is the current policy objectives as well. Again, government will always say we already are doing all this. We already have it within our policy. So just a few lines to say within the policy, we have already highlighted certain actions that should have been taken anyway.
The keyword is should.
That's the thing. So usually what I do is I highlight the policy objectives at the start to say what we're saying is also not contradicting to national policy as well. So if they say, again, it's really covering ourselves. Okay, finally, I already have just a few minutes left in terms of recommendations. Not much. I think they're all very comprehensive, but I think the bigger picture here is, especially with the new government coming in, I think there is room for looking at even broader. And what I'm trying to say is when we talk about the farmers, agri-food sector, often is seen vis-a-vis rural development. When the Pakatan Harapan came to power in 2018, there was a lot of talk about revitalizing rural development. And I think a lot of these issues are so systemic that we need to look at that level, to look into revitalizing rural development as a whole. And I think it would be wise for the government to look into that. Secondly, I mean, it's there, but really to strengthen the supply chain perspective in the agri-food sector. And I think there's a lot of support that the government or support that the players can have just by information, just by knowing the supply chain. Now, of course, there's some of the issues with income have to do with contract farming or issues of middlemen and so on. So there is a case for having information on who are the local supply chains across thematically as well. Okay, I have a few more. I'll give directly to Dr. Lin, but I think one key thing that's already there, but we really need to emphasize is essentially aligned with competition policy. And this is an opportunity. You've already highlighted, Dr. Lin, one of the first comments by the Prime Minister is on removing the monopoly from Pernas. And I was, I've got a lot of questions on this current government. What is the difference? Policy objectives are similar, but no one for a long time in Malaysia has touched the political economy. This is about the political economy. More specifically, if you want to talk about policy, this is about competition policy. This is about strengthening ICC efficiency. And I think if we resolve this or we start to address this competition issue of monopolies, it will make a huge difference within the agriculture sector. And it's not just even paddy and rice.
No,
it's across. So I think reviewing the competition of the competitiveness of all the agriculture industries would be a major recommendation moving forward.
Yes.
Sorry, took slightly more time and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alizan. From the review itself, I learned so much about supply chain and also the issues that we face. I take note about the reviews about the target groups and the methodology. I hope that the other reports, maybe we can also take note of that and see whether the themes that we covered, the key themes will be covered in all those reports.